Hello and welcome again to the 160th edition of the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast. This is the show where we talk about all things transportation, anything that can get you from over here to over there. I am the transportation reporter and the traffic anchor for Denver 7 News, Jason Luber.
I'm pedestrian advocate Joseph Peters. It may be only episode 160, Jason. It feels like 500.
What?
500.
Why does it feel like 500? That's usually what you say like to your wife if you're saying, we've been married for 5 years, but it feels like 20.
No, I'm just saying we've been putting out so much good content that it feels like we could have fulfilled 500 episodes worth of content for the people.
All right, so it was the context I was missing out on. Gotcha. Well, we received another voicemail from the same guy as we did last week. Well, at least we got one, though. His name is Greg, and he is offering some more content for the show. And you can do the same thing if you like. You can call 303-832-0217.
Hold on, what was that number again?
303-832-0217.
I didn't catch that.
303-832-0217. And you can leave us a message there. We'll get to his voicemail coming up in just a bit, but he's basically talking about road sign, the messages on the signs above the road, and a suggestion of a good one. Because we talked about that story a couple weeks ago where we were giving out some of the best road sign safety messages, and Greg has one for us.
Love suggestions.
So we'll talk to, or we'll hear from Greg coming up in a little bit. Also today, we're going to be doing another edition of the segment called Talkin' Traffic. This time, we're going to Ohio to talk with Jon Rudder. And Jon is a traffic anchor, helicopter reporter for News Channel 5 WEWS in Cleveland. He's one of the few remaining helicopter reporters in the country. And it's interesting, his story, because he started as a producer for The Now, which is our afternoon show that runs through Scripps, in June of 2015. 6 months later, he was on reporting traffic in the morning and then flying in the helicopter, which is a pretty quick jump going from producer to on air, especially for that position. So that was interesting. And he also does a radio show, doing sports talk radio stuff. He does some of that for Cleveland Browns stuff. And he also hosts his own podcast.
Well, there you go. The modern-day Michelangelo, ladies and gentlemen.
So we'll talk to Jon about all those things, as well as, obviously, traffic and transportation going on in Cleveland. And that'll be coming up in just a little bit. I want to take you to Marshfield, Wisconsin first. A woman driving along West McMillan Street, she crashed into a toilet that was left in the middle of the road. She stated to police she was distracted by a second toilet that was left in the opposite westbound lane when she crashed into the first toilet. The investigation began, and the officer who was investigating believed the two toilets were left on the road deliberately, as both were upright and intact prior to the collision, i.e. saying that they didn't fall off a truck and were damaged and cracked and crumbled, because usually they're made of porcelain.
Did they only find the two toilets?
I guess. That's all. I didn't hear of any third or fourth toilet.
I think we can all agree that two toilets remains too many toilets. But at the same time, two toilets in the road would be a difficult amount of toilets to navigate.
Yes.
In my opinion.
That is, you could navigate through one, but the second one, well, that takes your alternate route right out of the play.
I just so empathize with this woman, who I assume is an older woman, who probably has pretty bad eyesight, especially at night, right? This did happen at night. And so she became so fixated on toilet number one that toilet number two just popped out of nowhere.
It popped out of nowhere. There it was. Her car was damaged. She had to be towed from the scene. She was not injured, thankfully. But toilets are really not super cheap, so I don't know. They would have to be soiled toilets. I mean, maybe not at the time, but they were obviously used, because a new toilet is fairly expensive that you probably don't want to just leave in a street. Right?
Here is the real question. Have they found the toilet bandit?
I don't know. Maybe it came from one of those fixer-uppers.
How do you find the culprit in a case like this?
That's one thing that they always say to do whenever you get a new house, a new place, is replace the toilets, because then you're, then you have your own throne. It'd probably be a lot cheaper to just replace the seat.
But you do want your own throne, right?
I don't know. No, the ones that were installed in the house I bought were just fine. They do the function that they were designed to do. It's really not the best idea to cheat the HOV lane with a fake passenger, but if you decide to do it, I have a few tips for you right here. Number 1, don't pick something to ride with you that is extinct.
Okay.
And number 2, especially don't pick something that is big, bright, green, and obviously not human. A driver in Federal Way, Washington. I have no idea where that is.
It's in Washington.
Thank you. He failed on both counts. He was busted for driving in the carpool lane along I-5 alone. Well, I guess he was the only human in the car. He had with him a large stuffed dinosaur in the passenger seat. Washington State Trooper Rick Johnson tweeted out, "Even if you have your favorite stuffed animal, it doesn't count as a passenger for the HOV lane." Troopers stopped the car for speeding and the HOV passenger violation. That was his flaw. Speeding.
Well, I mean...
I'm sure the troopers also saw the dinosaur.
But the dinosaur is justifiable if you aren't doing the speeding, right?
Well, he probably wouldn't have been as noticeable if you weren't speeding.
Yes.
I'm sure the speeding was the first thing that tipped off the trooper.
Did you put that on your list of tips? Don't speed if you're going to put a stuffed dinosaur in the passenger.
I'll write that down
Beautiful.
right now. Okay. Washington has a new HOV law that took effect last summer, allowing troopers to add an additional $200 fine to the base fine of $186 if you are caught using a dummy, a doll, or other fake humans to make it appear that an additional person is in the vehicle with you. So you get the 186 plus now the 200 because you're trying to dupe the system.
I love that. I feel like it should be a sliding scale tax depending on how ridiculous what you put in the passenger seat is.
Oh, yeah, that'd be good.
So like a crash test dummy, I think that gets you like a $200 fine. But then if you put Barney in the passenger seat, that becomes a $10,000 fine. How dare you?
Because you're just so dumb that you should,
Yes, and you also besmirch Barney.
So you're saying the more creative and crafty and realistic, lifelike dummy that you take with you should be a less, the least on the fine amount.
Yeah, you know what? That's what I came up with off the top of my head. But now that we're talking about it, I feel like the more lifelike it is, if you get caught, the police should be able to fine you more as a bonus for themselves, right?
Well, it's a lot of substantial work that goes into it, so maybe you should get a discount for all the work that you put into faking out the police.
It's true, although in this particular case with the green dinosaur, it doesn't sound like there was a lot of work put into it at all.
Exactly, so maybe that should be the higher fine.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
It actually would maybe encourage some folks to really be creative with not just putting a skeleton or a mannequin, but really dressing it up.
Yes.
Making it look like a real person. Mm-hmm. But those are the kind of fines I'm talking about. If you have good fines, if you have extra fines for dumb stuff like that, boom, you're going to have people stop doing it. But how much has he saved over the however many years or weeks that he's been doing this?
Right, but he probably doesn't view that as savings. He just views that as his right to use the road.
So he's going to pay the fine and the toll one way or another. Mm-hmm. All right, a couple weeks ago, American Airlines passenger Wendy Williams, you've probably seen this video all over your Twitter feed or your Facebook post.
The Wendy Williams?
Not the Wendy Williams, not the one that came here. When we carried her show, not the one who has the TV show / radio show in New York City. She came here when we first started airing her show. That lasted for like a year.
Yep.
She came here as a promotional thing. That's a tall woman. That's a really big, tall woman. And she was wearing heels.
She seems lovely.
She was interesting. She was very outspoken. Mm-hmm. She was saying some inappropriate things on TV that was making I think, Kirsten very nervous. And, so that was pretty interesting.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was. It happened.
Okay.
There's a tape out there somewhere, though, I'm sure. Anyway, I'm sure you've seen this video of this woman who was sitting in her seat, and she was recording the man behind her in the seat, repeatedly punching the back of her seat because she reclined it. Mm-hmm. It's gone viral. It's everywhere. You should be able to see it somewhere.
Yep.
A byproduct of the video has been added fuel to the fire of this debate about whether we should be able to recline our seat or not. Or if you are a jerk automatically if you recline your seat. Even a little bit. Even a half recline. A quarter recline. A full recline. Are you a jerk for doing that because it's already so cramped in these planes. Are you a jerk for doing that?
If they don't want you to recline the seats, they shouldn't give you the option. There are plenty of airlines that just don't give you the option.
That is true.
Why are we even having
Spirit,
the conversation?
Frontier,
right?
Does Southwest? I'll be in a Southwest flight soon.
Southwest, I believe, does give you the option to recline, but I'm not. Don't quote me on that.
I'll be taking a couple of different Southwest flights. One to Oklahoma City for our trip to Enid, Oklahoma, for the regional baton twirling competition.
Beautiful.
That's in June, and then in July, we'll be traveling to Stockton, California, flying to Sacramento for the Nationals in Stockton, and then we'll be driving to San Fran Stinktown to give the girls a little tour of the bridge and see some of the sights in the Stinktown, and then flying out of the Oakland airport back here. So,
when are you starting to look at colleges, Jason?
Well, since my little one, my oldest one, is still in 5th grade, not for a little bit.
Okay.
Not sure exactly where she's going to end up or what she wants to do.
Maybe next year.
So anyway, Twitter users are torn on this matter, some condemning the man for his inappropriate childish behavior, and others criticizing Wendy for selfishly reclining her seat in an already tightly packed cabin. However, a handful of people said the airline was to blame because the cabin configuration doesn't allow for recline, even though the seat has the capacity to do it. Now, regardless of what side of the argument you fall on, I do think we can all agree that if the two would have just communicated a little bit about this problem instead of pretty much ignoring each other, rather than trying to throw each other under the proverbial social media bus, this wouldn't have been a story.
I don't understand how there are two sides to this story. I don't care how many times you recline your seat against me. Do not punch my seat. Do not punch my seat in the back of the head, and do not do it repeatedly.
Well,
what are you thinking? How dare you? Are you out of your mind? How is he not being charged for assault because of that?
Against the seat?
Against the seat. It doesn't matter. What are you doing? And what does it say about you as a person that you felt the need to sit there for, 5, 10, 15, an hour and just punch something repeatedly? What's wrong with you, man? Go get counseling. You need help. You don't need to be on social media defending yourself. And the people on social media defending you need to get their heads checked as well and ask yourself, if you find yourself in a similar situation, would you do this behavior? Is this something you would be doing, punching the back of a seat for 15 minutes because you got upset about something and wanted to throw a tantrum? How dare you? That's my opinion.
Well, what about this lady who then just reclines the seat? Obviously, this man is upset enough to start pounding on her seat. You would think that she would just unrecline to have him A, stop, and B, just to deal with it, just to have a more pleasant experience on the rest of her flight.
You've got kids. When you have kids and they're throwing a tantrum, do you reward their bad behavior?
No, I just
Exactly.
It depends on the situation. Now, if we're at home, where it doesn't matter that they could scream at the top of their lungs, that's one thing. If I'm out in public, that's a whole different thing, because it's different how you handle those situations.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like on an airplane, as we're talking about, where you have your child is screaming. Now, you don't want your child to scream. You don't want your child to be upset. So you just figure out ways to keep them calm. And we were very good, my wife and I, about doing that. But I would have. I don't know. I guess that's how would you have handled it if somebody's reclined in front of you?
First off, that man would have had the common sense not to do that to me or to you. I mean, that is something that you do to a 5'6" young woman who cannot protect themselves. You don't do that to a grown man, right? Had he done that to me as a grown man, I would have stood up and gotten a flight attendant involved. And if they chose not to do something about the situation, then there would have been a situation on the plane where there would have been a fight, and other passengers may have had to get involved. Because
Wow.
I'm sorry, as a grown man, you do not put up with that. You do not hit the back of my seat. If we can have a conversation, let's have a conversation about it. I don't recline my seat in the first place, so I would not be in that specific situation. But if I'm in a situation where somebody is hitting me or my seat or the area around me repeatedly because they feel like I have done something wrong, then we need to either have a discussion or we need to figure out a way to work it out.
Well, one airline executive has commented on the matter, and it was Delta CEO Ed Bastian. And Ed was on CNBC's Squawk Box, and he was really just talking about Delta's plans to go carbon neutral. But he was asked about this situation, and he was asked about his opinion on this debate that we're having right now, to recline or not recline, and the behavior of this guy who was pounding the seat. Now, as expected, he tried to avoid the question. He tried to be very PC all about it and skirt his way around the question. But when he was pressed for an answer, he said, I think customers have the right to recline. We've been testing reduced recline, but I think that the proper thing to do is if you're going to recline into somebody, that you ask if it's okay first. If someone knows there's a tall person behind them and they want to recline their seat, I think the polite thing to do is to make certain it was okay. I never recline because I don't think the CEO of the airline should be reclining the seat, and I never say anything if someone reclines into me. That from Delta's CEO, Ed Bastian. As you were talking about, I don't typically recline my seat. Mm-hmm. I just don't do it because I don't want people to recline into me. But if people do recline into me, I just grumble about it and go, oh, that's great. I just have this much less space on this flight. But the flight is going to be 2 or 3 or 4 hours. It's not that much part of my entire existence. I just put up. There's times when you put up with things, right? Mm-hmm. You have to wait for your wife all the time. Mm. I can't imagine the things I could have done with my life with all that time saved up. I spent waiting on my wife or children. Mm-hmm. Mm. It really is a phenomenal amount of time, but it's not worth it for me. That's my risk reward. It's just not worth it for me to start pounding somebody's seat or to shake them or to say, hey, could you just put your seat up because it's bugging the heck out of me? That's just me.
I couldn't agree more. To lead is to serve, right? In the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I don't want to be reclined on. I don't recline onto others. Why would I? There's no reason to.
Right.
There's just not a reason to. But again, I mean, the airlines can do something about this and just take away the option. Because there's no reason to give people the option if we don't feel like they should be able to exercise that option.
Or provide enough room like they do in first class, where if you do recline, it's really not going to infringe on my limited space that I already have.
Well, and there's something to this notion that people in the last row are at a disadvantage because you can't recline your own seat, but if the people can recline back into you, unfortunately, you can't do anything about that.
That was your choice for sitting in the last seat, usually.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I wanted to bring to your attention an issue that I find to be much more pressing.
What's that?
I feel like there should be a minimum height for the emergency exit row. If you're not 6 feet tall, you don't get to sit in the exit row. And the reason for this is all the extra leg room that's there that's always taken up by the guy and the girl who are a couple and they're 5'2" and they have 4 kids with them. Jason, you and I deserve those seats.
I was actually thinking that you were going to go with somebody should be tall, strong, able-bodied to be able to help in a situation as such as an emergency where you need to have the door removed from the aircraft, help evacuate people from the aircraft out in a safe manner, i.e. Sullenberger putting it down in the Hudson.
Yes, you're right. I said the quiet part loud. My bad.
That's what I thought you were going to go with this.
Yep.
But apparently you went with the whole, keep the short people out. You have no reason to live, Randy Newman. And you should be out in one of these other seats. And only me, a tall, large person at 6'2", 225, should be in that exit row seat.
Yes, I did say the last part, you and I.
Now,
because we're so good at opening the exit door and saving people in case of an emergency.
Your lovely wife, Tanya, she is not a super large woman. She's not 6 feet tall.
Yep.
So she would not be allowed in the exit row. You would be in there by yourself, and then she would be in the seat, presumably, hopefully, behind you, which you could recline into, and then she could pound your seat for the entirety of the flight.
Yes, that is correct.
As you are enjoying the extra leg room, and she is not.
Yes, really, it would be a parable of our marriage. I get to relax, enjoy myself, enjoy all the space, and she is just frustrated and punching me.
I don't think you can recline, though, also from the seat ahead of the exit row seats.
That's amazing. I don't know if that's the case or not, but what a wrinkle if that's true.
I do not, but because that row has to be available to exit people out. So I don't think you can recline from that row that's ahead of the exit row.
I don't know about you. I always go to the exit row, and I take that seriously, man. Like, I have thought so many times about how to rescue people in case of emergency because I am, like, the exit row master.
I don't take the exit row anymore because I want to sit with my 2 children who are not eligible to be in the exit row.
I see. Yep.
Nor would I want them in the exit row. But actually, thinking about it now, I might, because I would be next to the door. I could launch that thing out, and then I could launch those 2 out, and then get my wife out at the same time. But no, she would be on the other side, so that would be do me no good.
Well, there's also 260 other people on the plane, presumably, that you have to take care of.
Well, I would presumably be already out of the plane and going, see ya. I mean, what is the liability there if you, in the exit row, are just open the door and then take off running?
Well, I mean, do you
know?
Are we really going down this path right now?
Well,
Can we save this conversation for another day? Because I have a lot of thoughts about this. Like, for example, you're probably not going to use the exit row in case of like the plane blowing up in the sky. Where you're going to use it is water rescue, right? So
yes.
In that case, yeah, you are obligated to help everybody else get off the plane because ideally the plane lands on the water in such a way that you have plenty of time to get people out. So yeah, you should be escorting. Hey, come on, let's go. If you are parachuting out of a plane that's about to blow up, I do think it's a little different. Like
parachuting? I don't recall having a parachute.
Jumping for your life because you have no chance on the plane. My bad. If you're jumping out of a plane because you have no chance of surviving on the plane.
Because really, if you're crashing, unlike the Sullenberger situation, which is obviously very rare, most of the time it's on land, and most of the time there's fire involved, and most of the time it's all a heap of mess.
Yep.
And I think it's all everybody all for themselves. Do you really think the airline flight attendants that are supposed to be there first and foremost, as they say, for your safety, are going to help you off the plane? Or are they running for their lives as well?
New thought. Let's table this conversation and pick it up the next time we're on a plane. How we would both survive a plane crash.
Well, I will be on a plane in June and July.
Call me.
I will. Sure. Okay. Do you have one of the new fangled driver's license? Speaking of all this, the newer driver's license with all the the stuff they have. Hieroglyphics, and they have clear stuff on it. I mean, they have all kinds of cool stuff. It's all cool features.
I don't know, man. I have a driver's license.
Well, they have all these features on it, and one of the reasons that all the states are going this way to have all these new safety features on your driver's license is to comply with this new airport security requirements, because you have to have these clear, approved, TSA-approved IDs. And if you don't have one, then you're not getting on a plane starting October 1st. And because those licenses, when you get them, they require a little bit more than just your proof of identification. And you have a little star on the top of it. And it's called a Real ID. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. It's called the Real ID. And you have to have them by October 1st. And apparently, as I've been reading, a lot of states, even though they've issued a bunch of them, it's just about 34% of the citizens have these things, and it's going to be a big problem for the folks who don't have them if they're showing up to the airport. Because they have, 7 months or so to get them before that they're going to be locked off of the airplane, unless they also have a passport. So a lot of folks might be just opting to go get a passport, which I just had mine renewed, and it took me about 4 or 5, 6 weeks to get that back.
Well, I do think the vast majority of the public doesn't understand that this change is coming.
Probably not.
You know what I mean? Like, you see, it becomes white noise after a while. Like, unless somebody comes up to me and tells me these things, if I didn't work in the news, I wouldn't know that. Because
this is for not just international flights. This is for domestic flights.
Right.
So you're going to have to either have a real ID, or you're going to have a military ID, one of those global entry cards, or your passport to go through security, even if you're taking a domestic flight, not even an international flight. And if you're going to get one of these real IDs, you're supposed to, at your state license facility, you're supposed to present 4 pieces of identification: a passport or birth certificate, social security card, tax return, a couple of documents that's going to provide your official proof of residence.
All of this stuff?
All of this stuff.
Jesus.
Like a mortgage or a rental receipt or a utility bill, something like that. So you need 4 pieces of identification that shows that you actually live there, that you're a resident of this place, and that you can then get this real ID. And apparently there's a rush now for people to get these things, for the people who fly often, and even the people that don't. And now a lot of states say they're overwhelmed and they can't keep up. New Jersey says they have already overrun with appointments to go get real IDs. Oklahoma says only a handful of DMV offices are issuing real IDs. The rest of their state will get all the DMVs in action over the summer. Oregon says it's going to take until July before they're able to issue all these new IDs. Oregon and Washington are urging residents to get passport cards or passport books because they say the process is going to be quicker and you're not going to be delayed if you have to go to the airport and you won't be able to get one of these things. So I have one of the new driver's licenses in Colorado, and so it should work for me. Mm-hmm. At least that's what they told me. Mm-hmm. And the Department of Homeland Security says that they are maybe open to pushing back the date that this thing is going to be going into effect, October 1st, but so far they have not said that they will officially do that. So the clock is ticking, folks.
Go get your new driver's license now.
Go get your real ID, yeah, or get your passport. I always bring the passport of my girls when I'm going to the airport. Mm-hmm. One, to prove that, just to give it to the TSA because they like to do that. And two, there is a huge problem with human trafficking, and I don't want to have any question about these being my children. In Atlanta, when I was there the last time, there are signs up all over the place, and they have warning messages going over the loudspeakers about human trafficking. I saw a video of somebody trying to steal a child there at the airport one time, not too long ago, there at the Atlanta airport. So it's a major problem.
That's scary stuff. I mean, and it's always good to crack down on this idea that people can print licenses right now, fakes, really efficiently, and the Real ID is supposed to crack down on that. On the other hand, it does seem like a lot of work. Shouldn't you just mail these new IDs to everybody who has an ID that hasn't expired yet and say, hey, here's us taking care of you?
No. When does the government really care about taking care of you?
Well, I didn't say, is the government going to do that? I said, shouldn't the government do that?
Yeah, they should be doing a lot of things.
There you go.
They should be fixing our roads and our bridges and
if you
our infrastructure.
If you vote Bernie Sanders,
yeah,
it's possible.
No thanks.
Revolution.
Yeah, I don't want that kind of revolution.
A revolution.
I don't need that kind of revolution. No, thank you. All right, so speaking of, well,
revolution.
Go with that revolution. It's time to talk traffic once again, and this time we're heading to the Great Lakes, America's north coast, the forest city, the city Drew Carey built, the mistake by the lake, Cleveland, Ohio, to speak with Jon Rudder, the traffic anchor and helicopter reporter for WEWS-TV. You can watch John delivering traffic updates during Good Morning Cleveland from Air Tracker 5 and covering breaking news during the afternoon and evening newscast. Even like this morning, driving around on the roads, reporting live on the road conditions there. John, thanks for being here on the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast.
Hey, appreciate you having me. Thank you.
So before we talk about traffic issues there in Cleveland, tell us a bit more about, John, how you moved from newscast producer to talking traffic from the studio and from the helicopter. How did all that go down?
Yeah, so I originally started out as an anchor and a reporter at a small TV station in the Ohio Valley in the Steubenville Wheeling Market. I did a 2-year stint there as an anchor and a reporter, and you know how the business kind of goes. You kind of reach a ceiling somewhere, and there wasn't a whole lot more for me to do there, so I was just looking for something else to do. And the producing role that I found at Channel 5 was kind of like a utility role. I would do a little producing, I would do a little shooting, I would do a little editing, so it really kind of was right in my wheelhouse and was everything that I was good at and everything that I liked to do. So I did that for maybe 6 or 8 months, and I think it was right around the holidays, and we were short-staffed, and they needed somebody to go out and do some storm coverage like I was doing this morning. And one of our news directors looked at me and said, "Wait a minute, you've been on the air before, right? Can you go do this?" So I did it, and I must not have done a bad job because I did it a couple of more times, and then a month or so later we got a helicopter, and I think that they realized, your last name is Rudder, this would be perfect for you. So you want to fly an Air Tracker 5? So I of course said yes, and I've been doing that ever since. I believe that was January of 2016, so we're coming up on like 4 years now.
So do you like the traffic reporting? Do you like doing the morning thing in the studio, or do you like the helicopter thing, or one more than the other?
So that's a good question, actually. I think that they both kind of have their benefits. I really like being in the studio and kind of being a part. I really feel like I'm a part of the show when I'm in the studio. But at the same time, I mean, it's awesome flying around Cleveland. You get to see some awesome sunrises. I've covered a lot of really cool things from the sky. So, I mean, it would be hard for me to pick one thing over the other, that I like the best.
Yeah, my background is much of the same as yours, where I actually came from the radio side, where I was in the helicopter for the big radio station here in town, 850 KOA, and then came to Channel 7 and flew in our helicopter, which we call Air Tracker 7. I was doing studio in the morning till 9, and then I would leave, and then I'd go show up at the airport and fly around in the afternoon, run the camera, and be the reporter at the same time for the afternoon newscast. And it was great. I loved doing that. But here in town, we had all the TV stations decided that operating the helicopter is just too darn expensive.
Yeah.
So now we have a shared group of TV stations that actually run the helicopter, and the local radio station, KOA Radio, they actually throw a little bit of money in so they can put their radio reporter in there now. So it's a whole different situation where we don't have our own helicopter anymore, which is a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation, and a lot of the people who have been, in this Cleveland market for a number of years have kind of expressed the, a similar avenue or a series of events kind of transpired in Cleveland when, things kind of took a turn in 2008, and stations, everybody had a chopper, then stations started getting rid of their choppers. And then we brought it back about 4 years ago. So it's kind of been a really unique experience. I'd never been in a helicopter before, so I was gung ho to do it, and it was really interesting because we had this big station meeting, and our news director, Jeff Harris, was talking about, we've got this new addition to our news team, and we're going to add a helicopter. And, I think I was, 25, 26 years old at the time. And I thought, whoa, like, this is so cool. I probably seemed like a 13-year-old kid in the back of this meeting with like all of these veterans that had been at the station for 20 to 25 years. And they're like, who's this child behind us that's excited that we're getting a helicopter? It's a normal news operation, but I was thrilled for it, and I think they were I think that they saw that and saw that I was eager to make the most of an opportunity, and it's worked out well for both of us, I think.
That you and I have another thing in common there. The name Jeff Harris. He was also a news director here for a little bit.
Yeah, there's a pipeline from Denver to Cleveland, it seems like.
Yeah, because Sean McGarvey was Cleveland, because he just left, and now he's going to be doing directing content for scripts for the whole East Coast. So you've lost two of our news directors.
Yeah, he was an interim news director after Jeff left, and then he took the main job for probably about a year or so. And then just recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago, he took that promotion within Scripps. So the pipeline. Who else you got that's just going to start right now?
Well, we just hired a new assistant news director who was our morning show executive producer. So I think she's going to stay here for a while. And our last one before hers was sent off to not Toledo, but Tulsa. So they took another one of our assistant news directors, and now he is a news director there in Tulsa. So, yeah, the pipeline continues, apparently. Do you run the camera as well in the afternoon?
I do, yes. And in the morning. Anytime that I'm up there, I'm the one that's running the camera. Sometimes, when we're doing some particular storm damage, we'll take a meteorologist up. The way that our particular setup is in the helicopter is that, we can do the traditional talent up front, camera person in the back. But there's also a talent cam on where the camera controls are, so I can do both, and I have the talent camera right there in front of me.
I'm speaking to Jon Rudder. He's a traffic anchor and helicopter reporter for WEWS-TV, News Channel 5 there in Cleveland. You can follow him on Twitter at Jon Rudder, Jon, not John. I'm sure that you've heard, as we talked about a minute ago, how many stations around the country have stopped their helicopter program. I think they just stopped it there in Cincinnati, including at our Scripps station there. Yeah. And there's a couple other stations, I think Jacksonville maybe, and maybe even somewhere else in Florida. I think they're getting rid of their helicopters anyway. Do you think that your station is going to be committed to keeping the helicopter because they're going away? Obviously, they're expensive, as we talked about. Do you think there's a long-term commitment to keep the chopper going?
Well, that's a good question, and I know that when regimes tend to change in a newsroom, then news philosophies can kind of tend to change, and we might be going through that right now with Sean taking this new position, and we'll have some new leadership in there. I think that our contract will be coming up in about a year for the helicopter, so that's a big decision, and that's an easy line item to eliminate. And with the emergence of drones, and our station has a couple of drones that we typically use for news coverage, and the incredible image quality that they produce, and kind of the portability and flexibility that they offer. It's really kind of put a damper on maybe the helicopter market, and I really wonder how that's going to play out myself. But at the same time, the usefulness of the helicopter is kind of the immediacy, right? You have the breaking news, or you have something going on, and you're up in the air, and you can get there within a couple of minutes. And if you are solely operating with aerial video via drone, then you still have to pack up your stuff and throw it in the car and fight traffic and get to where you are and get the clearance and fire it up and get up into the air and figure out where you're shooting. So, there's still a time crunch there, and with the helicopter, that obviously eliminates that. And we've been able to be over situations and scenes very, very quickly, and I think that's provided value to our news station. And that's one of the reasons why we call it the breaking news leader in the sky, is because we do fly so much and we're over a lot, and any chance that we can to take that thing up, we usually do. You're right. Stations are looking at budgets, as they always are, and that's an easy one to eliminate. So, I don't have a definite answer on whether or not, or what the future of Air Tracker 5 is. I would certainly like to see it stay. I love flying around. We have some great pilots, and I think that it's a great asset for our station. But I understand that those are difficult decisions that leadership at a station has to make.
Yeah, it is frustrating for me sometimes that the current helicopter people, for some reason, they can't see the same things that I can see. I have over 8,000 flying hours around Denver, and you being up in a helicopter know how many hours that is. So So I can see when I'm just looking at the video from the helicopter how what's going on, where it's going on. It's really not that difficult to see where the problem spots are. Especially when you're looking at congestion on the roadway, or a crash or a stall or whatever is down there on the roads. But for some reason, the people that are running the camera up there in our chopper, they just can't see it, and it just frustrates me, and I start getting mad, and my blood pressure jumps up, and it's just not good for me.
And it's funny when you're up there, because sometimes you can even narrow it down to one or two cars that are not merging properly, or just driving slower and starting to cause the backup. And you almost kind of wish that you had a laser pointer that you could kind of shine down there and be like, it's the guy in the Toyota that's causing this right now. But
right.
I agree with you. I feel that frustration too.
So you've seen, obviously, a growth in the city over the last 4 years. You've been flying and just been covering traffic there in Cleveland. What has been some of the big growth spots, and how has traffic adjusted there through Cleveland now that you guys are growing?
Well, when I got to Cleveland, the big project that was going on, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with Cleveland, but the big project that was going on was the Interbelt Bridge. There was, a massive construction project, hundreds of millions of dollars of construction that was going on for this big bridge that was a main artery that carried, two of our major highways really right into the downtown area. And there were ramps that were closed and various lane restrictions, and they essentially kind of funneled all of the traffic into one bridge, and then built another bridge, and then rerouted that traffic onto that bridge, and then built another bridge. So that I think that there's 4 or 5 lanes going across it right now, and it was down to 2. So you can understand just how much of a pinch that was, especially when you have a major metropolitan area, and then traffic gets funneled down from multiple highways into that bottleneck. It was almost like clockwork. Every day we could kind of pick out, 6:45 we're going to be over 71 in the Metro curve, because that's where traffic's going to bottle up, because it always does. And since that's completed, we really don't have that backup issue there anymore. So we've kind of moved over to 77, which is just kind of on the other side. It's really interesting how some of the highways are. 77 and 71 are kind of parallel to each other, running south of the city. So that backup is kind of shifted over to 77 now, because they're doing some work on that stretch of highway. So typically where the major construction projects are, it's not too hard to find the backup that goes along with it.
But Ohio DOT must be huge. You have 3 very large cities. You have Cincinnati, and you have obviously Cleveland, and then you have a bunch of smaller towns. You have Toledo and Dayton. You really have a whole bunch of big places there in Ohio to deal with for the DOT. So how are they to work with? How are they at managing those kind of projects and the overall traffic and congestion?
My relationship with ODOT has been really good, actually. I go back and forth frequently with a lot of their PIOs and their communications managers on Twitter, and they're very. It seems like they're always up when I'm up, and they're always aware of issues whenever there's a problem. So they're very forthcoming with information, and any criticism or any I guess any criticism that we may have of them, as long as it's warranted, they're pretty honest and open with answering any questions that we might have with any delays of projects that might be going on. So, I mean, they've been very, very transparent and open with just about everything that I've had to deal with them. And a couple of years ago, maybe a year or so ago, I think that we had a couple of issues, a couple of problems with contractors not finishing up construction projects on time. There was, overnight work that was supposed to happen on 90 where they were going to restrict the traffic down to one lane, and that was supposed to be wrapped up by 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And for whatever reason, the contractor missed that deadline. So that construction lingered on into 6 and 7 o'clock, which just created a traffic nightmare. And they were kind of frequently they were on top of that, and they knew exactly who the contractor was, and they reached out to the contractor. They fined the contractor a couple of times to ensure that didn't happen in the future. So my relationship with ODOT has been a good one, and one that I exercise that almost daily. It seems like I'm reaching out to them for one reason or another regarding something traffic or weather related.
I'm speaking to Jon Rudder. He's the traffic anchor and helicopter reporter for WEWS-TV, News Channel 5 there in Cleveland. You can reach him on Twitter at Jon Rudder, JONRUDDER. Overall, the traffic congestion there in Cleveland, when I'm looking at the lists of the worst places that you see traffic, obviously Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco, Denver is up there in the top 20 on the list usually, but I really don't see Cleveland as one of the worst cities or the best cities there as far as congestion. It's just somewhere out there as not too bad and not too hard to get around.
It's not, and it's funny because we have some people here that they come from LA, and they hear about Cleveland traffic and they're like, well, I was in traffic for 20-25 minutes. That wasn't bad at all. But you talk to somebody from Cleveland who's been in traffic for 20 to 25 minutes, they're ready to rip their hair out. So it's interesting to see the varying degrees of frustration with the traffic here. And I would kind of say that Cleveland really doesn't have a particular traffic problem until there's an accident, because things can just get very, very difficult and very, very slow quickly. And you understand that anytime that there's an accident, you get a couple of lanes shut down, and especially if it happens during peak drive time, it's a nightmare. So there aren't any, I wouldn't say that Cleveland particularly has a traffic problem. It's pretty smooth sailing by and large for the most part.
Yeah, and with weather, obviously, you guys getting snow occasionally, and when you have these lakes snow events like you're seeing here, that can obviously play a huge role in how your commute fares out.
Yeah, it does. And what's interesting, and something that I've noticed over the last 4 or 5 years or so, is it's not necessarily the weather itself that causes the problems. It's like the change in the weather. If you have a stretch of weather where it's fairly calm and mild and you don't have anything going on, that first day that you have snow or rain, all hell breaks loose. There's crashes and there's accidents and there's slowdowns. But if that weather persists for 3 or 4 days, you kind of start to see that subside. Or I've noticed that we kind of start to see the accidents and the slowdowns subside. It's like people see that the first day and are caught off guard by it, and then they kind of adapt their driving over the next couple of days, and we don't see as many problems out there. And then conversely, if you have snow or rain, and one morning you get a lot of sunshine out there, same thing. There's a lot of backup, specifically anybody that's headed east on any of those major highways. We see some major congestion issues, and it's just kind of funny to see that you can look at the forecast and see cloudy and rainy for a couple of days. Well, Thursday, we're going to get some peaks of sun during that morning drive. That'll probably be a mess out there. And usually we're right. And it's funny how that plays out.
Yeah, sun is always a huge problem for, I think, any morning drive. Cleveland, they have your own transit system, what they call it, the Rapid, I think, right?
Yes, yeah.
And it's pretty standard system with just light rail. I think you have a trolley, the buses that run around town. But I see that the RTA is facing similar issues that many cities like Denver is facing and other cities are facing with low ridership and financial changes and challenges. And I think the desire also by some to expand the service into the outlying areas without ever raising fares.
Yeah, and that's kind of a fine line that they have to walk, right? They want to be able to offer these services and these routes, but at the same time, they have to be able to fund them, and money's short everywhere, and I think that's one of the problems that the RTA might be running into. And look, I'm as big of a fan of the Rapid as you're going to find. I try to take it as often as I can, but sometimes it's just not feasible or efficient from where I am, and it's kind of because of I currently live on the far west side in Lakewood, in Westlake. I did live in Lakewood. And there just aren't a whole lot of routes that go through there. So I would love to take it more if there were an opportunity to. I just don't necessarily have those opportunities. It's quite efficient. It's rather cheap. I mean, $5.50 gets you a pass all day. And it's a far better option to find a rapid station, pay $5.50 and ride the train in and take, an extra 10 or 15 minutes and pay $25 or $35 to park for an Indians game. And then you don't have to battle traffic. So, I came from a small town, so I've always been very interested in public transportation, and trains, and particularly the Rapid, are something that I try to utilize as much as I can. But you're right, there's always room for growth, and you wish that there would be a way that you could maybe pour some more money into that to make it more viable and to increase ridership and get more people on that.
And you're a good example of that first mile, last mile problem where it doesn't come right to you. So how do you think you can solve that first mile, last mile problem where it gets you from your door to the station or to the nearest bus stop?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I tell you what, if I did have that answer, I might not be working as a traffic reporter at Channel 5, but it's tough because you're always looking at ways to maximize routes and to expand routes, and you're right. If people don't have that option right at their door, they're less likely to take it. I think that maybe the communication part of it and just is a big aspect of it, because for the longest time, RTA always boasts that you can take the Rapid to the Indians game and pay $5.50 and have a round trip ticket, and it drops you off right at the ballpark. Well, I know that all of the routes end at Tower City in downtown, but what I didn't know was that Tower City is connected by an underground tunnel directly to the ballpark. So that's something that's maybe some fine print that I didn't necessarily notice or didn't necessarily realize. And I was an out-of-towner moving to Cleveland, and there are more people, young people like myself, moving to downtown, and we're seeing a lot more apartments and things being built downtown. That wasn't something that I was necessarily clear on, so I think that they might be able to do a better job of just communicating that, like, hey, yeah, it does drop you off at Tower City, which is, the last stop is at Tower City, which is a couple of blocks away from the ballpark, but there's an underground walkway that you can, don't have to worry about crossing streets, fighting traffic there. It literally drops you off right at the queue or Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse is what it's called now, and you're right there at the ballpark or the arena if you're headed downtown for an event.
Sounds a little like Minneapolis, where they have a lot of underground tunnels between buildings, so people don't have to walk outside in the freezing cold.
Yeah, and it reminded me a lot of Toronto too, because my first experience in Toronto was last fall, and similar situation. They had the underground path system, and it was really cool to kind of walk the underground tunnels to connect to the subway system and navigate your way around a big major city like that. I've always been fascinated with the New York City subway system. I may have mentioned, I come from such a small town. There were 65 people in my graduating class, so I wanted as big as possible when I was looking for places and destinations to where I was going to end up living and working. And I think Cleveland's a nice mix of that. I'm not far from home. It's a big city, but it's a city, but it's got a smaller feel, and it's got public transportation and things like that. So it's a nice mix of both.
I agree with you on the whole subway thing. I almost like a little bit the grunginess of it.
Exactly, and, right? It's like,
yeah, and the people that are
part of its charm.
Exactly, and the people that are playing music in there or trying to entertain you for money, or it's always a show in the New York City subway, even though it is kind of gross, but some of that grossness is actually fun.
Right, it's part of its charm, and that's what you talk to a local, and they hate riding the subway, and I understand that it probably does. You go there as a tourist, you don't have those restrictions about trying to be somewhere at 8:15 and the A train goes down, and you don't have to worry about that. So as a tourist, you have that luxury where you're kind of taking it more for entertainment than you are for necessity. But I've always thought it was efficient. I have never had a whole lot of problems with it anytime that I've ever taken it, and I've always thought it was just a fascinating system of just how large it is. I mean, Manhattan is an amazingly big space, and you have all of these people crammed there, and everybody's trying to get to the same place, and you have tunnels upon tunnels and routes upon routes, and it's just such an intricate system. And I've always been fascinated by that, and it seems like one of the reasons why I enjoy the Rapid so much here in Cleveland is because it's kind of a miniaturized version of that.
Yeah, I don't think I would want to live there, though. That's one place I would not want to live.
I think that I would like to try it for a certain amount of time, but ultimately I would like to retract back to a city like this, maybe the size of Cleveland.
Yeah, I was in. It was around Christmas time years ago in the Macy's there in New York City. And
yeah, it's a good time to be there.
Oh, right, yeah, but it's also a crowded time, and I kept getting bumped. So people are bumping. I'm a pretty big guy, and so people are bumping in my shoulders. Well, after a while, I got sick of people running into me. So then I'd give them a little shot with my shoulder. I'm like, you're going to run into me, you're going to feel it.
Yeah, it's definitely crowded there, and I think that's part of the. I think that's again part of the charm for me is because I came from just such a small area. And I've always enjoyed that big city feel, and I've always enjoyed a lot of people, milling around, and I think that was one thing that I've always liked about it. But conversely, I could absolutely see that, and I know that a few people that live in New York City or grew up in New York City that I went to college with, and they despise the subway. So it's funny just to hear the two perspectives on it.
I'm talking with Jon Rudder. He is the traffic anchor and helicopter reporter for WEWS-TV News Channel 5 in Cleveland. So I've asked all the folks that I've had on the segment here called Talkin' Traffic what the biggest pet traffic peeve is. I guess I didn't really say that right. What's your biggest traffic pet peeve as you're driving around?
Right now with the snow that we've got here and it being winter, I think the biggest pet peeve for me is people not brushing off their cars, because you don't necessarily realize how dangerous that is until you're on the highway and someone's just dusting you with snow that's blowing off of their car, or you've got a truck in front of you that's just spraying everybody with snow. It creates a visibility issue. You can't see people in front of you. You can't necessarily. It kind of disorients you. It distracts you because that's kind of what you're focusing on. And if you need to make a lane change or if you're trying to get off at an exit, it can certainly distract you and again create a visibility problems for that. And I think that's the biggest frustration, the biggest pet peeve for me, particularly for this time of year. Is I see so many people with, and it's not just the light layer. I mean, there's people. I take pictures of people who are out on the highway with 6, 7, 8 inches of snow on the top of their car, and you're just waiting for that to break off. And that, how many times do you do stories about, or do you see stories across the country of somebody getting hit with a sheet of ice and it causing an accident, or a chunk of ice or a chunk of snow falls off of their car and ends up causing a crash? I mean, I see those all the time, and I just think that's such an easy thing to avoid. Go out a couple of extra minutes early and dust your car off and avoid that.
Yeah, I don't know what the law is there in Ohio. In Colorado, you have to clear all of your windows, your front, side, and rear windows, but you are not legally required to brush off the snow from the roof of your car or from the rest of your car. But like you said, it's obviously very dangerous. I received a question from somebody about that, clearing snow from the top of buses. And those are huge, and they carry a lot of snow, and they can just fall right on somebody and then, obviously, as you said, cause limited visibility for a short time, or have chunks of snow or ice crash into somebody's car. So I don't know do you know what the law is there in Ohio?
Similar law, you have to have your windows cleared, but I don't think that there's any restriction as far as for snow on the top of your car. So it's just it's frustrating. And again, it's probably, I'm sure that it's something that people aren't even doing on purpose or intentionally. It's just something that you don't even think of. My windows are clear, I'll hop in my car and I'm off, ready to go. You don't realize that you're just dusting people that are behind you and creating all those problems.
A different kind of crop dusting than you do in the newsroom, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's right. All right. So I know you have your own podcast, and it's called Two Skinny Ties that you do with Trent McGrill. So tell me about your podcast.
Yeah, if we could get him to actually change his avatar to where he would have a skinny tie in the avatar, the name might make a little sense, or a little more sense. But it was just kind of an idea that we had probably a little over a year ago. Trent got here, I think, January of maybe 2019. And, he and I we get there at about the same time in the morning, and, we're usually chit-chatting or BSing about something that either happened in our lives or, something that happened that we're talking about. And it always turned into some outlandish conversation or a huge joke, and somehow the entire studio would get in on it. And we kept thinking time and time again, like, oh, like, I wish we had our microphones on right now. I wish we were recording this. So we thought, why don't we start a podcast? And we hemmed and hawed about how we wanted to do it or what we wanted to do. And then, our station kind of installed put the infrastructure in for a podcast studio upstairs. So it just kind of made sense that we would go up and give it a try. And that's what we did one day. We just went up and turned the microphones on. And I think that that's kind of the style that we like. It's just kind of an informal conversation that, three people that are sitting around a microphone on. And it's worked out well for us. We kind of go through ebbs and flows about, with consistently posting. I think that that's one of the keys to building an audience, is just to consistently publish and post. And I'm sure that more than anybody that the restrictions and difficulties that can be, how difficult that can be with working in a news schedule. And then Denver, I'm sure Denver has some crazy weather too. Trent gets busy with weather as well, so it can be a challenge sometimes to pump out episodes consistently. But we've had a lot of fun guests on. We talked to a lot of people in house. And I think that that's really cool to hear different people's stories about why they got into journalism, what they like best. We just did a podcast with Terrence, who was one of our anchors on the morning show, Good Morning Cleveland, I think he was at the station for 7 years, and he had been an anchor for 5 or 6 of them. So, he has seen a long. He's seen a lot of Cleveland and a lot of growth in Cleveland, so it was interesting to talk to him about how the show has grown and the people and what he's going to miss about Northeast Ohio and Cleveland. And then conversely, we've gone outside of the building and we've talked to John Adams, the drummer guy for the Cleveland Indians that you always see on, anytime that the Indians are on national TV, he's the guy up there pounding his drum in the bleachers, and he's been doing that for 40 years, and he was just a catalog of stories. So we try to keep it informal. We really don't have any specific, questions or guidelines. We just kind of turn the mics on and see what happens. And it's done well, and it's gone well so far. And I'm anxious to see who we get, because we've got some good ideas for what we want to do here in 2020 with it. So I'm anxious to see where that goes here in 2020.
I can't tell you how jealous I am that you actually have an official podcasting studio in your building. I've been asking our management for 5 years now to build a podcast studio, because we still record in our old recording booth where all the reporters and anchors do their voice tracks for the newscasts or for their stories. And so I have a mixer that I bought and some equipment that I put together, and then I just run it through their little mixer here. But I'm telling you what, I would love to have our own podcast studio. So maybe you can get Sean to come back here and help me build one of these things.
Well, or we could bring you out to Cleveland and you can kind of steal our blueprints and our schematics for it, and bring it back out to Denver. I think that was an initiative kind of station-wide that they wanted to do. Our brand is kind of a better land, so we're constantly focusing on stories that shed a positive light on Cleveland, people that are and positive newsmakers in Cleveland. And I think that was one of the keys. You're always supposed to have a niche, right? And I think that was one of the niches that our station wanted to capitalize on and grow on and be able to do more long form interviews with newsmakers in Northeast Ohio. So they developed this podcast or this podcast studio and kind of put the infrastructure in there, and probably premature and before anybody really wanted us to, Trent and I kind of went in there and powered it up. And
that's the way to do it. You just take over. Right. You just got to take over. Claim it as yours.
Don't ask for permission. Ask for forgiveness. So that's kind of what we did, and we've just kind of run with it from there. So it's been good. We've had a lot of fun with it, and like I said, we're anxious to see where things go and some of the guests that we get on for here.
And again, that's called Two Skinny Ties, and I'm sure you're on Stitcher and everywhere, right?
Yeah, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, anywhere that you can download a podcast, we're there. So it's great.
Well, there you go. You still have a little time to catch up here to the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast. This is episode actually number 160.
We lost track of the episodes that we are putting out. So one of the jokes and one of the quirks of our show is we usually started up with, "Welcome to Two Skinny Ties." This is episode, what, Trent? 220, 221 that we're on right now. So we make up a number, throw it out there. And it's funny because our guest is in whether it's somebody that's in the station and knows how long we've been doing this, or somebody that we bring in, they're like, oh my God, wow, 220 episodes already. And we're like, yeah, it's more like maybe 20 or 25, but it's just kind of a nice joke that breaks the ice and really kind of gets the conversation flowing to start things off.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. It really seems like you're following my career path, doing radio and TV, the chopper thing, the breaking news thing. I do think you do a really nice job with all of that stuff. So, you sound great doing all of it, and you handle yourself really well in the helicopter, because I know it's not the easiest thing in the world. Is that what you want to keep doing? Is that what you would really like to do, or would you like to get into anchoring or maybe sports reporting? Because I know you do some of that too.
Yeah, if there are opportunities ever there to anchor or to do some sports reporting, I would love to do that. I'm content where I'm at. I hate to make it seem like I'm jumping at the next opportunity, but because I really do like what I do. How many people get to say that they can fly around Cleveland and take great pictures and see all these wonderful. I mean, I covered the Cavs championship parade from Air Tracker 5 6 months after we got the helicopter. I mean, if you would have told me that, I would have never believed you that I would have gotten an opportunity to do something like that. And that was one of the more incredible things that I've gotten to do. So I love it. I'm willing to do it for as long as they're willing to have me. But at the same time, I would, if there were an opportunity to do something like that, I would be definitely interested in it. So I think the most important thing is that I'm at a good spot. I'm at a good station with a lot of great people, and I think that makes it easier when you're trying to figure out what you want to do. Is that you can kind of sit and you have that luxury to sit back and wait and do something that you enjoy with people that you love to be around. And if the right opportunity comes up, that's what happens.
Thanks again, Jon. Jon Rudder, the traffic anchor, helicopter reporter for WEWS-TV, News Channel 5 there in Cleveland, Ohio. You can get him on Twitter at Jon Rudder. Jon, thanks again for being here on the show. Appreciate your time.
I appreciate it, my friend. Thanks for having me. And if you're ever in Cleveland, you are more than welcome to be the third tie on Two Skinny Ties.
That'd be perfect. I would love that opportunity. I would just take over your show, and then you would just
perfect.
So that might not be the
crazy
best.
East, right?
Yeah, there you go. All right, thanks again, Jon.
Take care. Thank you.
All right, and there he goes. Like I said, I would not be surprised to hear soon that his station is going to do away with their chopper program, or that other stations are, if they have chopper programs there in Cleveland, are joining together for one chopper like we have here in Denver. Mm-hmm. That's why I don't fly around anymore. All the companies here in town, it started with Channel 9 asking us. They said they were going to get out of the helicopter business because they couldn't afford it anymore. So they approached our GM at that time and said, hey, would you be interested in doing a sharing operation? We could share the cost and trying to work it out. And they said, sure. And then Channel 4 got on board, and then Fox 31 got on board, and so all the stations now share one helicopter, and they basically lease it from Helicopters Incorporated, who provides the pilot and the photographer, and then KOA Radio, they throw in some money so they can throw their radio person in there, basically renting a seat, if you will. So it brings down the cost a little bit more for all the TV stations, but that's how it works here.
And the behind-the-scenes stuff is fascinating. The idea of stations owning their helicopter, I do really think, has gone by the wayside, and it becomes an advantage in a lot of markets where one station has their own helicopter and the others do not.
Yes.
That was what we saw in Las Vegas, where you had two stations with helicopters, two stations that did not have helicopters for a very long time. The ones who have the helicopters have a huge advantage in almost every breaking news situation.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I thought it was a big disservice for us to do that. And I do still think it is a competitive advantage to have your own helicopter. Yes, they cost a lot of money, but I also think that they offer a lot of value, especially to that individual station. And frankly, I think the viewers demand that they have that kind of coverage.
Well, and it's a real inefficiency in this market that could be exploited by somebody who was a budding entrepreneur and wanted to purchase their own helicopter contract and enter into a deal with one of the radio groups themselves and just do it independently of everybody else so they could get that exclusive footage that other people aren't getting by flying that helicopter at times when the news stations are not.
And I even think you could do it with an airplane. You could outfit a fixed-wing airplane, maybe not a Cessna 182, but maybe something a little bit more powerful that's not going to cost as much as a helicopter. You can't hover, but you still, for the most part, helicopters aren't hovering over a scene anyway. They're all orbiting. And so you can do slow orbits in an aircraft, like a little fixed-wing airplane, with a camera system on it, like a helicopter that is geostabilized, run a camera person in there as well, and you could do basically the same thing for a lot less of the cost. but it's not as sexy as a helicopter. It's not as sexy to say, "Hey, we have Airplane 7 flying high above the scene."
I'll tell you what, I don't care what it is. If you have something that the others do not, you have an advantage.
I completely agree. And there were times as a split shift is when I was doing morning traffic like John, and then flying in the helicopter in the afternoon. And I didn't actually, when I was doing it at the time, I didn't mind it too much. There's nothing like going to the grocery store at 9:30 in the morning because there's nobody there. It's actually pretty nice.
Yep.
Or the gym or whatever.
Yep.
But I probably wouldn't like it as much now because I like being with my kids in the afternoon and go picking them up from school at 3:30, and that's when I would probably have to head back over to the helicopter for an afternoon shift. And so it's nice to be home when they're home and be at work when they're at school. So that part works out for me anyway. All right, so as I mentioned at the top of the show, we received a voicemail from a loyal listener, from Greg, and this time he wanted to comment on the story we talked about, where he went through the top DOT overhead sign safety messages. Well, Greg has his own contribution to the show. Here it is.
Yes, you No, you didn't call me, but you did request highway safety road signs, the signage that could change the way people drive. Best sign we've ever used in the state of Colorado, after, of course, UDOT used it, is camp in the mountains, not in the left lane. Just brilliant. Camp in the mountains, not in the left lane. Rock on, guys. Keep up the good show. Have an awesome day.
There you go. Camp in the mountains, not in the left lane.
Best advice I've gotten all day. Thanks, Greg.
I hear that complaint a lot. Left lane campers. I got a few more emails about it this week. I actually saw one the other day here in Denver. It read, "Against speeding tickets, raise your right foot." Not bad. Not great.
Not bad at all.
Not bad. Not great. I don't know, but it was okay. But if you have an idea for a safety message that you would like to share with us, here's that phone number, 303-832-0217.
Jason, I didn't hear that.
303-832-0217.
A little bit louder now.
No, you can call it
303-832-0217.
Thanks again for listening. Thanks to John for popping on the program. Appreciate it. We'll see about who we're going to have on next week. I actually contacted Sarah from our Tampa station, and she said she wasn't available this week, but maybe next week she's traveling because, she's a big shot deal. But she did say when I wrote to her that she has checked out the show. She has listened to the show, which is a good sign.
It's a beautiful thing.
So some folks know that we're out there, but they're not sending me back some feedback, which I wish they would. Anyway.
That's what the phone number's for.
Yeah, 303-832-0217. There you go. Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. And until next time, I'm Jason Luber, the traffic guy.
I'm Carnival Barker Joseph Peters.
Be safe, and as always, happy motoring.